Each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, and mothers of time. We are daughters of dust and sons of great visions. We're sisters of mercy and brothers of love. We are lovers of life and the builders of nations. We're seekers of truth and keepers of faith. We are makers of peace and the wisdom of ages. We are our grandmother's prayers, and we are our grandfather's dreamings. We are the breath of our ancestors. We are the Spirit of God. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are. For each child that's born, a morning star rises and sings to the universe who we are.
Good evening.
Good evening. How are you?
I am doing well. It is so wonderful to be here with you. I am
I
looking
agree.
forward to this evening.
So am I. So am I. So I'm Zohara Simmons, a member of the National Council of Elders and a long time civil rights activist here in the United States, and a peace activist and an internationalist.
Good evening, all. I am Nontombi Naomi Tutu. I am a very brand new, out of the box member of the National Council of Elders. So proud to have been selected. I am a race and gender activist and grew up in apartheid South Africa, which is what set me on this path to believe in justice for all.
Well, I can tell you how pleased we are that you have joined with the National Council of Elders. We are a part of also the King and Breaking Silence project of the Council of Elders. And we in the King and Breaking Silence project see our role as reminding all of us, ourselves included, in the legacy of the radical Martin Luther King Jr. And he inspires us to do our work in the spirit in which he did his, organizing to make nonviolent change in building the beloved community and bringing about the so desperately needed radical revolution of values.
Mm.
Now we have a live chat. Everybody who has joined us, and welcome, first of all, for joining us in this webinar. And we want you to know that we value and encourage your participation through the chat function. We have monitors who will be responding to your questions. And some of you will be asked to come on screen with us based on the questions or that you have. So we look forward to meeting some of you.
Mhm. At the National Council of Elders, we always begin our programs with an opportunity to center ourselves. And this evening, we are blessed to start with good medicine from two of our members, both people of immense spiritual depth. Elder Gloria Anab House will read from her poem titled Medicine, after which Elder Kathy Juan Povi Sanchez, Kathy, will perform a medicine cleansing in the ancient tradition of her people.
Medicine. Comfrey leaves on the forehead for a fever. Aspidity in a muslin pouch around the neck against colds and pneumonia. Pungent odor infusing a tattered undershirt with a mustard-colored aura. It was the smell of grandmother's protection through the winter chill. Medicine for thin limbs, medicine for spirit. Echinacea and golden seal for cleansing the blood. Cayenne for warmth. She knew the lore of curing. She harvested nearby roots and leaves. Once we knew how to heal. We knew the fit poultice to drain and close any wound. Call the wound slavery. Call the wound torture. Call the wound humiliation. Call the wound ignorance. Call the wound separation from kin. Call the wound denial of truth. Call the wound absence of love. Call it by whatever name. Once we knew the remedy. Burn the sage. Settle into its circle. Sit down in the quiet. Wait for the ancestors' whispers. Greet them with the drumbeat of your heart. They know the healing miracles.
Tana parime waba ho na bi imo na bi imo ne no na body ne ta ne osapu e kayende waba ho na bi imo na bi na go chukuyori di magi waba ho he chandi bo ho ne waka e ma ingu din parime na bi we winde piambo in te mani e ma peri Ponene wona mo abajo, weging boy. Yon in the mo abajo, good da good da. Nandi toa in the having the wemboa. By the balloon, but trumpet in Peaco, but some very good that kiddo. Each under the moon network on it. It can get more in my petty, good da.
Thanks to our NCOE elders, Aneb and Kathy. Aneb for her beautiful poem, and Kathy for offering up to the spirits in her tradition to open our session. So, Nomtombe, as you well know, I had the great pleasure of meeting and spending time with your dad when he would come to the U.S. And be on some speaking engagements and learning from him about your struggles with apartheid and how your community came together to overcome the harsh realities of apartheid And of course, having grown up myself in the Jim Crow South and being a part of the civil rights movement and knowing what we went through, I think, I'm just really happy for us to talk about our struggles and this present moment. We are not giving up in the face of the violence that we're now surrounded by.
Right.
So I don't know if you'd like to just share some things from your people's struggle against
Right.
apartheid.
I mean, I think that first I want to acknowledge with you that this time that it is 2025 and yet it all feels so familiar. I know for you that it feels familiar
Yes.
from your activist days in the South, in Jim Crow South. For me, it feels so familiar from our struggle against apartheid. And I think that the first thing that I have been saying to people is that it is right to acknowledge the seriousness of the time we find ourselves in. And it is also right to acknowledge that this is not something new. That this, when we talk about our struggles, we are acknowledging that this is an ongoing struggle in our world for those who believe in justice and freedom and the community, the beloved community, and those who believe that separation and division is a way of empowering themselves. And so for me, I recognize this time so much as so familiar to me, particularly of the time in South Africa in the 80s and very early 90s, before the end of apartheid, when the repression of the apartheid state seemed to be increased, not even seemed to be, was increased, that we lived in constant states of emergency, that people were being arrested, people were being killed, people were disappearing. The level of violence that we experienced from the state just seemed to be ratcheting up. And in fact, I have said to my children recently, I've said that, this feels so much like that time in South Africa. And when it seemed that the apartheid government was intent on holding on to power at any cost. At any cost. And yet the truth of the matter was that it knew that it was a system in decline. That was what they knew. They knew that apartheid was not sustainable, and they had to struggle with everything that they could to hold on to that privilege and division as long as they could. And I recognize this time, not just in this country, because when you look around the world, we're seeing the rise of fascism, of anti-immigrant movements, of racist movements all over the world, of Christian nationalism, of Zionism all over the world, where I think it is the same thing, a system that recognizes that it is in fact unsustainable, but refuses to let go. And it would rather kill itself and everybody around it with it, rather than concede that it is a system that has run its course.
Right. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean, because, of course, during the Jim Crow era, in Mississippi and Alabama and Tennessee and Georgia and all, the same thing was happening. Clearly, time was up for the racial segregation, the violence and all. And yet, those who were running those states, the governors, the mayors, the sheriffs, they kept pushing against change. And, I must admit that for some time, I was doubtful that we were going to be able to bring about that change. But, the people were galvanized and they were not going back. And so it was, given that when I started, I was, 19 years old in Mississippi, designated as a project director, not knowing anything about how you organize people. And so the people basically, they were just glad to have young people come, to know that there were young people from all over the country that supported their struggle and had put their bodies on the line to stand with them. But they organized themselves into the movement that brought about the change, And so I rely on that memory of what we went through, for those 8 to 10 years, and realizing that we were able to bring about the change that we knew needed to happen. And so this gives me hope in today's time because, in some, having been in the movement for 60 years, it's like seeing many of the things we fought for being rolled back. It's disheartening.
It is.
But I cry and brush myself off and say, hey, we got to keep on keeping on. We got to organize, movements to bring about the change that I know we desperately need. And I saw that happen during the Jim Crow era.
Right.
And, I had one thing that stands out for me when I left Mississippi, I was really quite broken in 1965. And I was, the Ku Klux Klan was rioting and burning buildings and, and some of us had become pretty much, suffering from trauma and stress. So I left to work in other areas of the movement. And when I came back 10 years later, I was amazed at how much things had changed, and more importantly, how it seemed that my white citizens who thought they would die if they had to eat at the same restaurant with us or swim in the same pool, they seemingly had accepted the change and and that just blew me away, because it was one thing to make them change the laws, but to see in many cases that people had actually embraced the change. And in many ways, what I see operating in our country today is the effort to push all that back.
Right.
And to put forward the old racist tropes and try to, bury the history. Now we're teaching our children, and all of them. I mean, I personally, for 20 years, taught at a predominantly white school, African American studies. And unlike what they say, this didn't make those students feel bad. They wanted to know more. And in many cases caused them to join the movement. So I know that change is possible. And that organizing, we can do this, but it is hard. It's hard.
It is hard. It is hard. And I mean, the powers that be want to make it seem impossible.
Exactly.
Right? I mean, that it's not a mistake that we keep getting flooded with things happening. ICE abducting people from streets in broad daylight, of people being deported, of, again, families being separated. That these are all actions that are meant to dishearten us, that are meant to
Yes.
make us think that we have no power, that are
Yes.
meant to make us think that there is nothing that we can do that will stop this backward movement. But
Yes.
I was telling some students who have been protesting in solidarity with the people of Palestine, who were talking about all the actions that were being taken against them by the police or college administrations or the government, is that, if what you were doing was not having an impact, they would not be doing anything to stop
Yes.
you.
Yes.
Because, I mean, why would you worry about a little gnat that is just, buzzing away over there? The fact that there is a big group of gnats, because they try and convince us that we are nothing but little cogs in a machine, that the fact that we are combining move with people in communities across the world and saying, this is not the world that we are going to hand over to the next generation. And the fact that the next generation is saying, hell no, this is not the world you are going to give us. And we
Right.
are going to make sure that our voices are heard and that we take action to change this trajectory.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And for our audience, we at the end of the program, we're going to have a number of things that people can get involved with if you aren't already involved. And we hope you'll put in the chat organizations that you are working with and what you are doing, because we do save the chat and that can be shared as a part of the recording of this event. So, because we are organizers, all of us in the National Council of Elders come out of the organizing tradition,
Right.
be it the peace movement, the anti-Vietnam War movement. I'm glad to say that I was very involved in the anti-South African apartheid movement, and everyone in our organization come out of this movement tradition. And so we help each other, sustain each other through these very difficult days. I just want to mention that you were recently in Palestine. I was there in 94 and 95 to 96, and then back in 2004. And it was terrible,
Right.
especially in Gaza, because we were able to go to Gaza at that time. But what did you find recently when you went to Palestine?
Yes, I was able to go to Palestine, sponsored by Sabeel, which is a Palestinian Liberation Theology organization. And we were there as a group of faith leaders last October. And it is horrific. And we were not able to go to Gaza,
I know.
obviously, but we were in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. And I can tell you that the level of repression that we saw was terrifying at that time. And then to hear from the people who we visited how much that has escalated, how settler violence has escalated, how military action, the demolition of homes has escalated, that it, and yet at that same time, what we saw from Palestinian activists across the board was the determination that, no, we are not going to give up the dream, the right of our own state. And I think that for me, one of the most powerful experiences was visiting the home of Iyad Banat, who is an organizer. And we visited his home soon after the police and military had attacked his family's home. And they had destroyed furniture and electronics. And yet Iyad and his family and the community welcomed us, hosted us, and reminded us that we are all in this struggle for human rights together, and that it might seem that the Palestinian struggle is far from us, but when, as Dr. King said, we are interconnected, and that there is no way that injustice in Palestine does not impact our quest for justice in this country and around the world.
Yes, and it's been so amazing to work with students. The school where I am retired from, we had an encampment. And I was recently in Detroit and meeting with students that had been in encampments at the University of Michigan and at Wayne State. And in my school was the University of Florida. And just seeing these young people, they're being educated just as I was, during the early 60s. You come in totally unaware maybe of what you're really up against. And that's what I found with the students, and them talking about, even though they're communities, because they built communities, these encampments were just wonderful places. Kind of reminded me of the Occupy movement, where communities were built, where people were learning together and sharing food, and the community was bringing food and drinks and everything. And so, this is why the school, and particularly our government, is so frightened of these kinds of activities, because these people build communities in these situations in ways that they would never do if they weren't involved in a movement. So it was wonderful to just be out there with them, seeing them with their little tents and playing music and having study groups around the issues related to Palestine and the like. So I think that was an example of coming together, making community at the same time that they were fighting against a terrible injustice being done to people in Gaza.
And to just continue our conversation, we are really fortunate tonight to be able to bring to our webinar friends a conversation between two of our dear friends.
Yes.
Our fellow elder, Janet Wolf, and the Reverend Rodney Sadler, who I just call Rev, in a conversation about activism and hope and resilience in the face of chaos.
Yes.
I am so grateful for who and how you are. I think of all the times we have collaborated and conspired. We have dreamed and dared. We have wept and laughed together. And I just am thankful for who you are and how you are, and for taking time to be here. Would you say a word about who you are and why you do what you do?
Well, hey, I'm Rodney Sadler. I am Associate Professor of Bible, Director of the Center for Social Justice and Reconciliation at Union Presbyterian Seminary in Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm pleased to be able to go to Howard University, so one of the premier African-American institutions in the country. Was trained there to be about understanding how our people have always contributed to the world and want to make sure that we make the best contributions that we can. I was trained at Howard University School of Divinity with some of the most amazing theological scholars in the country. And they always talk to me about the theological commitments to bring about transformation. Worked closely with a number of people, one of whom was Kane Hope Felder. And I worked with something I helped him found when he started the Biblical Institute for Social Change. And it's been years later that I reflected on it, that it helped me to see that the Bible was not just for soul salvation, it was for social change. And we need to be involved in utilizing that power that we find in the text to unleash new narratives of freedom and liberation in the world.
So, with all of that, how is it that you reckon with churches who are by and large theological justifiers for the very systems and theologies that are oppressing people, that are attacking people, that are brutalizing people day after day after day?
Well, I think that I pray that I never surrender those churches to that sort of broken ideology, broken theology. I hope my job is to awaken in them a different sense of understanding of what it is that the text has said, what it is our theology should be in response to that text, and how it is that we're supposed to enter the world. I don't believe that the church is ever meant to be, as Dr. King called it, a polite social institution for those who are living comfortably in the world, that we should not sit silently behind the anesthetizing silence of stained glass windows. I think that we were always to be in churches, energized to go out into the world to bring about transformation. One of the lines that most inspires me when I read scripture is the simple line, a throwaway line from the Lord's Prayer, as it said in the book of Matthew, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. And it reminds me that our job is to be about the manifestation of God's kingdom on earth, not somewhere else, but on earth.
Right.
So that the church's job is always to be about transformation. So one of the things I like to do is when I'm engaged with congregations is to stir them up, to have them question what the tenets of their faith are. And if they're tenets of their faith, leave them comfortably within the sanctuaries and leave them comfortably in a faith that comes to church on Sunday and comes to church on Wednesday and for the rest of the week goes on about its life. Then that's
how did that happen? I mean, if the biblical text is so clear in sending us out as a movement to transform the world, how did we end up with so many churches who simply justify what's happening right now? Some of the awful, brutal things that are happening right now.
Because I think
excused by the church.
Yes. I think in a very real way, and please forgive me for jumping in there, but I think in a very real way, the church represents power. Faith community represents power. And because we have such a strong commonplace in the Bible and in the manifestation of the church, for years, people have claimed the church in their struggles for justice, freedom, and liberation, or for oppression and the maintenance of a status quo. If you look at Frederick Douglass's 1845 Narrative Life of Frederick Douglass, the appendix thereof, as a great conversation where he talks about the difference between the two churches he saw. One of them was the slaveholding religion of the South, and the other was the Christianity of Christ. And between the two of these, you could see no possible opportunity for overlap. And I think that what we dare not to recognize today is that an entire section of our faith community is the unrepentant, unconfessed children of the slaveholding religion of the South. We never dealt with these issues. We actually had the church in the aftermath of the Emancipation Proclamation, in the aftermath of the Civil War. The church is the institution that began to crystallize what the established racial boundaries would be that would eventually foster Jim Crow and the sort of segregationists in the South. And they used the biblical text to support it. People were intentionally misappropriating the text in order to support paradigms of oppression.
I think of Howard Thurman, who used to argue that when we stand at a distance, we become theological justifiers for the very systems that have pushed people with their backs against the wall. The gospel, he argued, was born there, as the prophets were among the communities of people pushed by systems, by theologies, by structures, so that their backs are against the wall. When we move from there to a place of privilege, we lose the story and become the justifiers.
Amen.
What then do we do? And what's public theology got to do with any of that? And can you tell me that in a way as if I was somebody just standing on the street struggling with the way things are going? What's public theology got to do with any of this?
Thank you for that question. I don't know that I'll do great justice to it. I'm going to try, though. I'm going to start off by saying that I think what public theology has to do with it is a reminder that Jesus does not fit safely inside the four walls of the sanctuary, that Jesus needs to come out in the street and meet the people that are there. And the Jesus that we see was always in the streets meeting people there, was never, Jesus of the temple who just sort of sat there. Jesus was always in the streets involved and engaged. So I think reminding people of the necessary engagement in the larger world of who Jesus was is a good place to begin. But then we, again, have to go back down and dig in deep on to the messages that Jesus raised. Jesus's primary ethos was premised on two different texts, and he made them very clear. When asked what the greatest commandment was, for example, in Luke chapter 10, the preface to the Good Samaritan narrative, Jesus he's actually told this by a lawyer, and he confirms it. In other passages, he makes it the claim himself, that the primary law is to, he's asked, what is the greatest commandment? And he says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, your mind, your strength, from Deuteronomy 6:5, and love your neighbor as yourself, from Leviticus 19:18b. And you say, well, hold on now, you've already violated it. We asked what the one great law was. And the point is that you can't separate those two laws. Those two laws are inseparable. You can't say that you love God if you don't love humanity. 1 John chapter 4, verses 20 and 21 says it better than anything else. How can you say you love a God you've not seen if you don't love your brothers and sisters whom you have seen? There's a necessity of engaging and caring for those who are around us if we are to say that we love God and we express God. So I think that the church needs to remember. It needs to be remembered, i.e. reconnected with itself, its history, its story, so that it can find again the authenticity of the need to express this sort of greater vision of love. It needs to be remembered to a larger understanding of the fight for justice and truth in the midst of the larger world. It needs to be remembered to the fact that it was never supposed to be aligned with the powers and principalities, because as you said, quoting Thurman, those who have their backs against the wall, we're going to talk about the gospel. I love the way he divides between Jesus and Paul. Paul, he's sort of a guy that sits in well with the system. Jesus, if you fell into a ditch, would be another Jew in a ditch. Was crucified like so many other Jews on a cross. Jesus was a common person that dealt with the experiences of common people, that was trying to say, we can have a better world too. And in the better world that we can have comes in reimagining how we see ourselves in the midst of this world in relationship to a God who's made us all worthy.
What does imagination have to do with any of this? And how do we begin to reimagine this country, reimagine what it means to be church, reimagine ministry?
Well, thank you for that. And I think when I think about Reimagining America Project, a Reimagining America Project is actually a truth and reconciliation process that a friend of mine and I, Jennifer Roberts, former Mayor Charlotte, and I started about 5 years ago. We were out in the streets the first day of the George Floyd uprising in Charlotte, and we realized that it looked like a number of white supremacists were trying to lead the crowd into the beginning parts of a civil war, a black against white. They wanted to get people to start firing bullets and then cause this kind of motion. And there was a lot of tension out there. And as we looked at each other, we said, we've got to stop doing the same old common dance, i.e., people come out, protest, city council says, we're going to do everything to change everything, and they do nothing. And then the police say, oh, we're going to fix these things that are wrong with the system, and they do nothing. And then they get somebody to come down from the police department in Washington, the police, federal, whatever, and they say, oh, look how wonderful all the changes that they made, and they're not going to bring you together and tear gas you, and they're not going to do these things. Aren't you happy? All right. And then things go on, and then 2 months later, the same thing happens again. So we said, why don't we do something different? Why don't we look at transforming the larger systems? And think about the work it would take to do it. And before we do that, why don't we make sure that we show people what's actually going on? So the first part of Reimagining America project was to say, let's see clearly what is going on. Let's let you see the way that race impacts housing, and race impacts healthcare, and race impacts education, and race impacts every dimension of life, environmental justice, environmental issues. So how does race impact every dimension of life in society? And in as much as it's influencing every dimension of life, how is it that it's limiting all of our potential to be the best America that we can be, economically, socially, politically, whatever? And then once we've identified the problems that exist, let's think about what things would look like if we got them right. What would it look like? What would imagination look like? So how do we imagine the kind of country we want to live in? What would the systems that were in place look like? What would the policies that enforce those systems look like if we got things right? What things would have to change? What injustices might have to be addressed? What redress might need to be made for past exploitation? How might we begin to look at all of these things and then begin to work towards a system that has the possibility of change? I love this idea of imagination as a powerful tool, though. I've talked before about the notion of narrative shaping the way that we live our lives in the world. And narrative is nothing if it's not fueled by imagination. A narrative that's trapped within the extant state, narrative that's trapped in the status quo, narrative that's trapped in the extant injust is a broken narrative. We need a reimagined narrative, a narrative that allows us to think about possibilities and push the boundaries of what is. And only once we have that sort of reimagined vision of what can be, might we live into something different. Something inside for so strong for me means that there's an unconquerable dimension of the human soul. And it's not necessarily an isolated one in my soul versus in our collective soul. There's something about us that makes us realize that we're not made to be oppressed, and we're not made to be left out, and we're not made to be to underachieve our potential. And the world is better when we're all able to achieve our potential. There's something inside that is so strong that we need to nurture it. We need to lift it up. We need to encourage all people to live up to their full potential. And when I think about this notion of something inside so strong, it reminds me of the fact that we all have agency. And as an American person, a person who lives in a theoretical democracy, I realize that democracy is only strong as a democracy if each and every individual within that democracy has the ability to effectuate change. And they realize that ability, and they foster the kind of world that they want. If the world that they want is not achieved, then they've not done the job yet that they need to do. We need to work together to bring about the kind of changes that we want to see. There's something in us that is undeniable, that is strong enough to live up to these circumstances and situations, and that can bring about the kind of change that we want to see.
Something
Amen.
inside. Something inside so strong.
So strong, yes.
Oh my goodness, yes. Our spirit that cannot be broken. Something inside that makes us refuse to be oppressed, to be marginalized. Thank you, Reverend Sadler and Janet. That was inspiring. And now we're going to invite some of the people on the webinar to join us in conversation. And first of all, we will go to Peter. Peter, where are you?
Hello and greetings, dear blessed friends and leaders. This is so inspiring. I'm in Rhode Island, and here, and I think everywhere, people are locked down in fear and dread. And you spoke earlier at the beginning about how in your struggles and in the communities of struggles, you work through fear and dread. Talk a little bit more about the resources, the ways in which we do that each day. That's my question, and thank you.
Yes. So for me, the first is not accepting the idea that we are isolated. You know, I think that what makes the oppressive powers feel strong is when they can convince us that if we shy away from those who are seen as troublemakers, or those who, this idea that, okay, well, they'll come for those immigrants there, but if I am quiet, then they won't come from me. That if I pretend that I don't see my neighbors being arrested, being carted off, if I pretend that it is normal for journalists to be removed from their shows, as Joy Reid was, if we allow all of these things to happen, then it just ratchets up their sense of power, and in fact ratchets up our sense of isolation. So if we keep thinking that we are simply a drop in a bucket, rather than recognizing that we are waves in an ocean, and that combining our voices, our bodies, our dollars is in fact the way that we stay strong, and that we bring an end to this feeling of fear.
Thank you so very much. Thank you.
And I believe that we have Gan. Sorry, am I getting that right?
I think it's Gan. Yes.
Gan Herman. Hello.
Can you hear us, Gan? Oh, great. Okay.
Hi. Yes, I can hear you. I don't know if I can do a video.
Okay.
I had a question for Reverend Tutu. I've learned a little bit about the shack dwellers movement in South Africa, and I'm very intrigued by the work they do, especially in building the leadership of the poor. And I suspect there's a lot we could learn from them. So I wonder if you could share with us, from what you know about their work, some things that are really important for the work we're trying to do in this country to build the leadership of the poor, because those most directly impacted by the injustices are those who must lead us.
Right. And the Abahlali bomjondolo, Abahlali basemjondolo is the Zulu name, which means shack dwellers, and it is a movement that is across almost all the provinces of South Africa. And it has been started by those who live in shanty towns, informal settlements, people who have built their own accommodation and have been faced by homes being attacked by the police, who have had their shacks bulldozed, and have said that, we were being ignored in the national conversation, that we are the ones who suffered the most from apartheid and have benefited the least from the democratic South Africa. And so it is a grassroots organization that tries to bring to the light the claims for land, for homes, and for dignity for all South Africans. And it is, as I say, it is a grassroots organization, and they have focused particularly on building coalitions between the marginalized. So in the time of xenophobic violence in South Africa, when immigrants from other African countries were being attacked in different townships, Abahlali basemjondolo said, we have more in common with the immigrants than we do with the people who are attacking them. And maybe this is an important lesson at this time for people across the world where political elite are trying to divide on the basis of race, of national origin, of faith, that the idea that those of us who are marginalized for any identity that we have more in common with one another than we do with the billionaires, the 1%, and any attempt that attempts to divide us based on race, based on national origin, is in fact something that increases all of our oppression and does not benefit any of us. That, you know, this movement that the immigrants are taking our jobs is the attempt that was made towards Abahlali baseMjondolo to turn them against my immigrants in South Africa. And they said, no, we are those at the bottom of the economic pile with these immigrants, and we have more in common.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, I didn't even know about that movement, Nontombe. I'm so happy to learn about it. You have to tell us more. You know, one of the things that I learned as an organizer with SNCC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, is that the organizing you do in the local community becomes the foundation upon which the national efforts or the regional efforts are built. And I learned that, you know, in a hands-on way in Mississippi and later in Georgia. So we're going to move now in our program to focus on nurturing community, building power, and working toward building this community of peace that we all want. Peace nationally, peace internationally, peace in our neighborhoods. So we have Elder Bill Wiley Kellerman, who is in conversation with an extraordinary activist priest who is doing great things in Detroit. His name is Reverend Barry Randolph, or as they call him there in Detroit, Pastor Barry. And so I'm eager to hear from him because I was just in Detroit and fell in love with the place, and I want to hear from him about what he's doing.
I wonder if you'd share a little bit about what it means to help form them, or what it means to develop a culture of peace involving and even learning from young people, perhaps.
Yeah, so when I became a priest, and I was called, so I had a burning bush experience where God literally called me into the ministry, being part of what's happening at Messiah. And one of the things that he told me was, go get my young people. And I said, well, Lord, how do I do that? He said, first, young people, they don't, it's not that they don't believe in me. They just don't like the package that the church put me in. The gift is the same. The gift is Jesus Christ. We're a Christian church. The gift is Jesus Christ. He just said, change the packaging. The gift is the same, making it user friendly. So what we did was we combined spirituality with activism. And Messiah got that long history of activism, of education, of affordable housing, workforce development, just all of the different things of building people up. And he said, use that and activate their spirituality and their activism together. Because when you look at Jesus, where was he? Highways, byways, in the street, making a difference in people's lives, calling disciples, changing society. And it was done through spirituality and activism. So that's exactly what it is that we do. We get their warrior spirit, and then we use that in order to change community and neighborhood. And the church grew, mostly with young people. That was unexpected. But for a while there, pre-COVID, 60% of our congregation was African-American males under the age of 30, which blew my mind. That's who showed up. And that's the thing. We always think young people, we think they reject God. They don't reject God. They don't like church. They don't have a problem with God. Young people want to stand up for justice. They want to know, what are we going to do about poverty and illiteracy? What are we going to do about homelessness? What are we going to do about what's happening with people all over the world? What are we going to be doing about wars? And the church, a lot of times, is silent. They want to be a part where it's a movement, but not necessarily a religion. They want to be a part of the righteousness of the movement.
You mentioned the Silence the Violence march, and that's been around since 2008, right?
Yeah.
I've been doing that. I wonder if you'd say a little bit. I know it's grown and spread outstate in a variety of ways, and I know the Episcopal bishop has been really supportive.
Yeah.
But I wonder if you'd say just a little bit about it's an annual anti-handgun march, am I right?
Yes. So we created it back in 2008 after a few young people in the neighborhood were murdered. They were innocent victims of gun violence. And we knew we had to do something. We just could not allow them to die, and then that would just be it, and we go on with our lives. So we created Silence the Violence, and what that was is what it is today, but it was a smaller thing in the neighborhood of Island View. 58 people got together, and we decided first we'll honor their memory, and then we will come and bring together the people working to eradicate it, building out strategy, building and promoting community, promoting peace. That's what we were doing. It wound up turning into an annual thing. And after about the third or fourth year, we noticed people from all over the city were coming because people were saying, here's a place where you can honor those who have died, and you can come work with people who are coming up with strategy, working with groups and organizations working to eradicate it. Then we looked up, there were 1,000 people here. I'm part of an organization called End Gun Violence Michigan, which I'm part of that. Our bishop is the president of that. And so she came in working on the issue of gun violence and started helping us promoting this should be the work that the entire church should be doing. And the next thing you know, it went statewide. So it's not just in Detroit, it's everywhere from Monroe to Marquette. There's a Silence the Violence event. They're not all the same thing because in Detroit it's a march, but they are also tree plantings, their art shows, their concerts, their teach-ins, their town halls. They all honor the innocent victim of gun violence, and then they're bringing together the people who are working to eradicate it. We helped to write the legislation that got passed in Michigan, the first gun laws in 40 years that got passed through our state house. That was amazing. And then also, too, we helped to create the atmosphere through which we have the community violence intervention work. So it's been amazing work. And it was to honor those 3 young men who lost their lives back in 2008, that they would not die in vain. Yeah, and one of the things that's so vitally important that I think that we forget about, creating these micro communities, you are actually allowing us to be who we used to be. Looking back in the day, this is what community was. It's just going a little bit backwards. It's going a little bit more so the way the community was. Everybody say, you know what, it takes a village, and we used to be a village. All it is going back to what's already worked. I grew up in a community neighborhood. Everybody looked out for you, whether that was the mailman or the butcher or the banker or whoever it was. Everybody kind of looked out for you. Children were sacred and our seniors were sacred, and people looked out for our community. And all it is doing that exact same thing. We used to be intentional, and then we kind of got away from that, and then we kind of got in trouble. I believe we just need to go back and be a little bit more intentional again and create that sacred community.
A little bit ago, you mentioned both the Boggs School and the Boggs Center. Grace Boggs was one of the founders, I don't know if you know, of the National Council of Elders, and she basically lived in your parish, just a few blocks from the church. Her home became the James and Grace Lee Boggs Center. out of which a lot of organizing happens. I wonder if you'd say a little bit about either about your relationship with Grace or the connection between Messiah and the Boggs Center.
Yeah, so I can honestly truly say Grace Boggs changed my life. She is one of the people like her and Father Ron. There's Ron Spank. There's so many people who have actually helped to make me the person I am today. Looking at her legacy and her life and having the opportunity to actually meet with. I used to sit at Grace Boggs' feet at the Boggs Center and just kind of get all of this information and knowledge. And it was just amazing.
At the very beginning, you referenced the housing ministry of Messiah, which is huge. Could you say a little bit about the housing work and maybe how it connects also to Culture of Peace?
A few things. So the Housing Corporation has been around since 1978. And over those years, it has built or rehabbed 213 units of housing. And I think right now, currently, I think we own 49 vacant lots. It might be more than that. I'm going to go with the low end. But the belief is you cannot gentrify a neighborhood if you own it. So it's all about ownership. And it's not just the ownership from the Housing Corporation's point of view, but from the community point of view. And it's always been affordable housing, true affordable housing for Detroiters. Not like that affordable housing where you got all of the suburbs, the suburban numbers all mixed in, and then nobody can afford it because nobody's making money like that. This is true affordable housing based on the city of Detroit. With building that housing, we get to put the mentality of the church's mission, not a religion, not proselytizing or anything like that, but a mindset of righteousness to be, to look out for your community, to look out for your neighbor, to become part of a community. And it is a privileged community that you're coming into. So it's not like you just coming in and you get to kind of mind your own business. No, you're kind of coming into a tribe. You're coming into a community where there is a culture of peace, where people are going to look out for each other. And this neighborhood is intentional. So you're coming into an intentional community created by people to be able to have the type of village that they know where they can be safe, they can raise their children, and they can grow old in. And I think so many times we forget that we're not calling people into religion, we're calling them into righteousness. And so many times we concentrate on what religion is, but if we would just concentrate on the righteousness, to be able to look out for our brothers and sisters, to be able to look out for the least of these, to stand up for those who are opposed, for those who have to deal with injustices. This is what it is Jesus called us to do. And that does not mean just going to a building on a Sunday and worship. That's a praise time. But the work of the church is not in a building. It's actually in the street. And if we kind of take it to the street and make it tangible, something you can see, touch, feel, be a part of, I think that's when God is pleased. I get in trouble because I say sometimes as church, we commit spiritual malpractice. We can talk a good game, but if we can't pull it off, then we need to be quiet. So it's all about pulling it off. We need to be able to do the work. So the church should be the developer. The church should be the educator. The church should be the place of community and safety. That should be the place where you can redo your life and have an opportunity to be able to start all over. The church should be the employer, and it should work towards equity and righteous economics and be that place that everybody want to be a part of. So I think that's what we should be working on. And there are congregations and churches literally following Messiah's model. And it's not just in Detroit, it's all over the country because they fly in to come see what we're doing. And I'm just trying to figure out, how do y'all know about us in Oklahoma City or in Memphis, this, that, and the other. But this is the age of technology, and people talk, and you can see the results of what it is that we do. And I think that's what it is. And we're called to cast out the demons of today, poverty, illiteracy, apathy, all of those things. We're called to cast out those demons. So we have work to do.
And you're doing it.
Yes.
I'm so grateful for your willingness to tell the story here, to preach to us a little bit, but especially for the work of you and the congregation in that Highland View neighborhood. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I mean, that reminder of what the church is meant to be, more than an institution, rather than an institution, the community of the faithful, the body of Christ.
Yes.
Thank you, Elder Bill and Pastor Barry. That was a powerful and encouraging conversation. Sister Zahara, I hear you have somebody special to introduce us to.
Well, I understand that my friend of many, many years, Ched Myers, is here with a question. Hello, Ched. My goodness, how are you?
It is so good to see and hear you, Zohara, and all of y'all. So many friends and elders on this call.
Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to hearing your question or comment or both.
Well, thank you. First of all, I'm just delighting in this gathering of the wise ones, and so many of you I've had the chance to work with, and so many of you are my elders, like you, Zahara, and Janet, and Bill, and Rodney's a younger, but he's a yelder. And also delighted to hear Pastor Barry. My roots also partly lie in associating with Church of the Messiah from a distance. So this is really wonderful. And it is precisely these kinds of spaces where we're talking at least partly across generations that I think are so needed. And that brings me to my question, really following on from Pastor Barry's and Bill's reflections on community. I'm 70 years old, so I was just behind the kind of classic 60s generation. Those were my older siblings and friends in the movement. And so I've always had a sensitivity to generational balkanization. And our capitalist society has gone very deep and wide in socializing us into generational balkanization. They segment us off to market us and to entertain us and to give us technologies, and these things functionally mean that it's often difficult to organize cross-generationally. Now, obviously, the National Council of Elders is an attempt to name that and overcome that. But unfortunately, it takes more than just invoking it. We've got to rebuild a culture of intergenerational respect. And I think that's really hard because we've all been socialized to a greater or lesser extent into spaces that are no longer intergenerational, right? Our churches used to be an intergenerational space, but aren't really celebrated as that anymore. Our neighborhoods used to have much more intergenerational organic connection than they do today. And, obviously the role of media and technology and all of that. So the question that I want to lay before you, which is really a deep question that I hold along with the council, is what are some of the successful ways that you are finding on the council to bridge the generational divide, when, in my experience, working with younger people, younger colleagues, which I've done really concentrated on for the last 25 years, there's kind of an ambivalence among many younger activists and younger creators and younger movers and shakers with relating to their elders. And I know for some of us, we struggle with that, but I think many of us had organic elders who midwifed us into the movement and maintained us in the movement. I think that's even harder today than it was 50 years ago. And so I'm just, and that can be for the two of you or whoever else is on. It's just, it's a deep conundrum. It's been difficult to do in our work, even though we continue to try to relate to younger folk. It's not second nature in our culture. Is this making sense? What I'm saying before? I just really want to turn it to you to listen to what's working and not working for you all. Thank you.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, and it's a very important issue for us in the National Council of Elders, and we work at having intergenerational meetings. We have a meeting coming up at Kirkridge where we will have a significant number of young people meeting with us. We've had a gathering of young people who were sort of setting up the agenda, and we basically were letting them run it, if you will, and asking us for what they wanted. And when we meet twice a year, we always have a significant number of young people. Now, these are activists, so we're not talking about young people who don't have a sense of organizing and movement building. And we're very happy that we had a delegation to go to Vietnam to celebrate the 50th anniversary of the reunion of Vietnam. And we had a number of young people go with folk who had long experiences in with the Vietnamese people since the war itself. So this is a big part of our work, and we find that the young people are very eager to work with us. I mean, I just think about when Occupy was first started, they reached out to us and said, join us. So, some of us went trekking off to San Francisco to sit with them, and in New York City to sit with them, as well as, in my case, sitting with the Occupy young people in Gainesville, Florida, where I am. So we are, in fact, the National Council of Elders always had in its thinking that we had to be intergenerational, because we know that our time is limited. And if the movement is to continue, that young people have to be integrated thoroughly into it. So Black Lives Matter, Occupy, the encampments all over the universities, many of us were engaged with those young people doing that work. Thank you so much, Ched. It's great to see you. We got to catch up. Okay.
Yeah, and I mean, and if I can just add that I think that one of the things that I have found too is, as Zohara was saying about going to join the students in Occupy, is actually making sure that we are in their spaces rather than expecting them to come to ours. And I've found that when I've been on college campuses, that students are very open to wanting to hear the experiences of the struggles and what can we learn from it? What is it that we can take from you, both the successes and the failures of past movements, that they are looking for this intergenerational community just as much as we are. And I think it is important that we remind ourselves that this work can only happen in community, and to encourage one another to find. I tell young people when they ask me about what do you do, what would you suggest to us as activists? I always say, find your tribe, find your people. Find the people who will remind you why you are in this struggle when the work seems endless and it feels like you're banging your head against the wall, but also the ones who will tell you that taking care of yourself is part of the struggle. That we don't want you burnt out. We don't want you feeling that it's been too much. So one of the things we are going to encourage people is to find the community where you are of people who are active, or even people who are not active but are looking for community, looking for people to be with them, to visit them, particularly when we talk about elders, that many of the elders who were in the struggles in the past are now living in retirement communities, isolated, and not having the opportunity to interact with young people. So encouraging young people to, storm those retirement communities, ask people their stories and ways that they can encourage us.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we want to thank everyone for joining us this evening. We want you to subscribe to the King and Breaking Silence mailing list. That's KBS mailing list, in order to get our weekly e-blasts that we send out by email and learn about all of our future events. We are going to close this wonderful evening. I know I could be in conversation with you, Nontombi, for at least another half hour or so, because I want to hear more about the work that you've been doing since the end of apartheid. But we'll do that again on another time. And I know that you and I both are very involved with the work on Gaza and trying to stop the genocide. So, but we are going to end the program with another of Elder Aneb's gorgeous poems. This one is titled Survival Number One. And please, guys, stay on, because we have vital information following the poem. So don't leave, because we want you to see the list of things that we encourage you to get involved with as we bring about the change of values and the change in the culture of violence that we have all been steeped in. So please stay on. Thank you for coming.
Survival lesson. Choose a beautiful song in the tradition of our elders' faith. Listen to it until the tears come. Stretch and dance, your body reflecting the centuries-old spirit of our people. Bathe, feel the blessing of cotton on your flesh. Look for the sun. Put one foot before the other. Glory in each single step until the trudging becomes a sprint.
Started out as a whisper, turned into a scream, made a beautiful noise, shoulder to shoulder marching in the street. When you're all alone, it's a quiet break, but when you're band together, it's a choir of thunder and rain. Now we have a choice, 'cause I have a voice. I'm not living to die. Don't stand in a wasteland, look at me in the eye. Stop living a lie and stand up next to me. You gotta put one foot in front of the other, with a hand in a hand, holding on to each other. Go on and rejoice, 'cause you have a voice. It is loud, it is clear. You're stronger than your fear. It's believing you belong. It's for calling out the wrong. From the silence of my sisters to the violence of my brothers. yet really free. It's killing me. No one is saying what we need to hear. I will not let silence win. Now when I see all the pain our people are in, there's no other choice, 'cause I have a voice. It is loud, it is clear, it is stronger than your fear. It's believing you belong, it's for calling out the wrong. From the mouths of our mothers to the lips of our daughters, we can dream like our brothers, speaking loud like our fathers. We can heal. Can you hear us? Can you hear us now? I have a voice. Started out as a whisper, turned into a scream, made a beautiful noise, shoulder to shoulder, marching in the street. When you're all alone, it's a quiet break, but when we stand together, it's a choir of thunder and rain. Now we have a choice, 'cause I